Item 3, motion regarding the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Regulation 2020 back from the committee. I call on the acting leader, Senator Murphy, to move the motion. Thank you. Could I call on the Minister?
Thank you very much, Gael, and I'm very glad to be here with you today to discuss this issue. An important pillar of government policy is to ensure the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve their maximum potential, and in doing so contribute to economic and social development across a wide geographic swathe of the country. The horse and greyhound racing industries make a valuable contribution to our economy. It is estimated that the thoroughbred industry has an annual economic impact of €1.9 billion, with direct and indirect employment of 29,000 people, and the greyhound sector provides an estimated 12,000 people with economic benefit. The thoroughbred industry in particular brings a high level of international investment into Ireland. Government funding, in addition to supporting these key industries, presents an excellent opportunity to yield a high return for its investment, leading to a flow of income right through the economy, thereby providing widespread benefits to our society. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive, as you will know, at global level, and we are the third biggest producer of thoroughbred foals in the world, and estimates place Ireland only behind the United States in terms of being the biggest seller of bloodstock by public auction globally. Time and again, successive governments have acknowledged the importance of these industries and have supported them through legislation and through policy initiatives. The support provided by public funds through investment in these industries has enabled Ireland to develop a world-class reputation for excellence in horse racing, greyhound racing and in breeding. The current COVID-19 pandemic poses particular challenges for Horse Racing Ireland, Rasia, Con Éireann and the industries as a whole. The Government Plan on Resilience and Recovery, Plan for Living with COVID-19, does not provide at any of the levels for a return to full commercial operations. This will impact significantly on the finances of HRI and of RCE, both this year and up to the end of the time span of the plan in June 2021. It is essential in these circumstances, therefore, that additional COVID-related supports are made available to HRI and to RCE, reflecting costs incurred and changes to the trading environment. These industries receive financial support from the state through the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund under Section 12 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001. My department makes payments from the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund to Horse Racing Ireland and to Rasia Con Éireann. In the period 2001 to date, a total of €1.36 billion has been paid from the fund to the horse and greyhound racing industries in accordance with the provisions of the Act. The cumulative upper limit on payment from the fund provided for under these relevant regulations has therefore been reached. Exchequer funding providing from the fund is crucial to the survival and continued development of the horse and greyhound industries. In order to give effect to the provisions of Budget 2021, this cumulative upper limit must be increased by regulation. The estimates for my department passed by both houses as part of Budget 2021 include an allocation of €96 million for the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund, and this will be distributed in accordance with Section 12(6) of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act of 2001, which accounts for 80% going to HRI and 20% to RCE, or in monetary totals just over 76 million to HRI and 19.2 million to RCE. In order to allow my department to provide the monies allocated in Budget 2021, it is necessary to comply with the technical requirement under Section 12, subsection 13 of the Horse and Greyhound Act to increase the cumulative limit on the amount payable from the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund by €96 million to some €1.46 billion. This is achieved by way of the regulations submitted to this House today. The aggregate limit on the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been increased in this manner in 2004 and in 2009 to 2020 inclusive. With regard to the horse racing industry, the 2017 Deloitte report into the economic impact of Irish breeding and racing, commissioned by HRI, indicates that the total direct and stimulated expenditure of the Irish breeding and racing industry is estimated at €1.84 billion in 2016. In addition, it is estimated that there are 15,200 jobs at the core of the racing and breeding industry or in directly related industries. Horse racing generates a very significant return to the rural economy in Ireland and a positive international profile for our country. Of course, behind all the facts and figures are thousands of men and women who directly and indirectly make the Irish racing and breeding industry what it is today. The 2019 annual report for HRI indicated another successful year for Irish racing and breeding industries. The focus on ownership leads to a further increase in the number of horses in training and more horses competing. There was also an increase of over 3% in attendance figures for 2019 and an increased demand for Irish horses at the sales, which was welcome given in particular the uncertainty as a result of Brexit. As proven in 2020, albeit mostly behind closed doors due to COVID, Irish owners, trainers, jockeys and horses are setting high standards globally, and their stellar achievements and enduring influence underscore Ireland's international prominence. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive at a global level, despite other major racing nations having much larger populations and much larger economies. It is worth noting that government funding, in addition to supporting this key industry, also presents an excellent opportunity to yield a high return for its investment, leading to a flow of income right throughout the economy. Support for certain strategic industries is important for future economic growth and can provide widespread benefits to society as well as for the wider economy. HRI has engaged extensively with my department and other key stakeholders in relation to the significant risks to the industry as a result of COVID-19, and they have reviewed a number of scenarios and financial forecasts that have taken appropriate measures to mitigate the financial impact to the organisation and to the wider industry. The significant threat posed by Brexit to the current ease of movement of horses between Britain and France, in addition to the global nature of major breeding operations, illustrate that while Ireland arguably now has leadership position within Europe, our preeminence is not guaranteed. With regard to the greyhound racing industry, according to the 2017 Power Report, the industry provides support and considerable employment both directly and indirectly in the economy. It is estimated in 2016 it supported over 5,000 full-time and part-time jobs in the economy. In addition, there are over 7,000 active greyhound owners. The total number of people deriving economic benefit from the sector is estimated at over 12,371. The funding being provided to the greyhound racing sector helps sustain a long-standing tradition, as the industry is part of the social fabric of our country. This funding underpins economic activity in what are, in many instances, less affluent regions of the country. The future of the industry is dependent on a strong governance platform and on the industry having the highest standards of integrity and welfare, founded on a strong regulatory system. Provisions of the Greyhound Racing Act 2019, which came into effect in May of last year, will make a real difference. This legislation strengthens the legal basis for the industry with a view to fortifying the integrity of the greyhound racing sector and improving provision for greyhound traceability. The new Act will improve the governance of Rasia con Ahearn, strengthen regulatory controls in the industry, modernise sanctions and improve integrity within the sector. It provides the industry with real tools with which it can effect fundamental change and reform. The sections of the Act commenced on the 1st of October 2020 signal a new era for the greyhound racing sector. They facilitate the board in focusing on its priority objective, which is achieving the highest standards of care and welfare of greyhounds. The Greyhound Racing Act of 2019, when fully implemented, will enable Rasia con Ahearn to ensure the important heritage associated with greyhound racing in Ireland can continue under the appropriate rules and regulations. The greyhound industry is predominantly a rural industry with a strong urban support base. The COVID-19 crisis has, similar to other sectors of the economy, resulted in a collapse of commercial activity in greyhound racing and significant reduction of activity generally. Recovery of the industry will require ongoing support to aid restoration of normal levels of activity and to adequately manage the welfare issues that arise. Betting tax Gael was increased from 1% to 2% in budget 2019 and now contributes €95 million to the Exchequer as of 2019 figures. Given the wide geographic industry of these two industries, they are fundamental to the achievement of a more balanced regional economic growth. Relieving the burden on our major urban centres and nurturing rural economies is a key priority for the Government. In this context, these industries should be given recognition for the considerable contribution that they make to rural economic activity and employment. The welfare of horses and of greyhounds is the cornerstone of both industries, and I am assured that HRI and RCE are striving to ensure the highest standards for the sport and its participants on and away from the racecourse. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has played a key role in providing this investment and has been instrumental in shaping the destiny of these industries. Brexit poses an array of substantial threats to the Irish economy, and coupled with the fact that we are a small, open economy naturally prone to volatility, it is difficult to predict what the future holds. It is therefore crucial that we support these important industries that are facing the perils of COVID and indeed Brexit as we enter into 2021. Accordingly, I am seeking your support to ensure that Horse Racing Ireland and Rasia Con Éireann receive the funding provided for in Budget 2021, and that the very important role played by these industries and the economic activity generated by them are sustained into the future. I commend the regulation to the House, and I look forward to discussing any matters arising. Thank you, Gael.
Thank you very much, Ara. And Anish, Seanad or Garret Ahearn.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. And thanks very much, Minister, for your speech. And can I welcome you to the House as well? It's the first time to get the opportunity to welcome you here. Can I first of all just say Senator Tim Lombard would have liked to be in here, but he couldn't, and he just wanted to put on the record of the House and to let the Minister know directly as well that he has his full support on this and on this bill today. The Horse and Greyhound Fund was established for the specific purpose of giving support to the horse and greyhound racing industries. It enables the state bodies to develop and provide economic support to the industries in their entirety and help stimulate economic activity in areas with very few employment opportunities. It is estimated that there's 15,200 jobs at the core of the racing and breeding industry. There was an annual report by the HRI done in 2019 that indicated, after another successful year in the racing and breeding industry, that the focus on ownership led to a further increase in the number of horses in training and more horses competing. And in 2019 there was an increase as well of 3% in attendance figures, and this was an increased demand for Irish horses at sales, which is obviously very welcomed with the uncertainty of Brexit. And as you know, and I'm totally sure, Minister, you'll continue, successive governments have acknowledged the importance of these industries and have supported them. The support provided by public funds through investment in these industries has enabled Ireland to develop and become a world-class reputation for excellence in horse racing, greyhound racing and breeding. The horse and greyhound racing industries have made a huge contribution to our economy, especially in rural Ireland, in places like counties like my own in Tipperary. It's estimated that the thoroughbred industry has an annual economic impact of 1.9 million, with direct and indirect employment of about 29,000 people in total, and the greyhound sector provides an estimated 12,000 people with an economic benefit. And as you said yourself in your speech, this is. These are people and these are communities, and behind the 29,000 people that I mentioned, these are people in small communities like my own in Tipperary, and we're very fortunate in my county to have a brand like Coolmore that employs so many people directly and indirectly in Fethard and in the wider region in Tipperary, and they're very good to our community, and they give back an awful lot. In terms of racing, but in terms of the community. And I'm sure, Minister, you're aware yourself that Coolmore have been very productive in trying to support Fethard as a community. They've worked together with the Department of Rural Affairs to start the new Fethard Town Park, which is a combination of 27 communities all around the area to build a new park, bring sports clubs together, sports organisations, communities together to provide a space for that area. And that's done because of the commitment and the support by Coolmore. But it's not just about supporting organisations like that. There's every parish in Tipperary, and I'm sure every parish in rural Ireland, has small stud farms and small horse owners or greyhound owners, and it's about supporting them. You know, we've made decisions in government to support so many sectors of society in the last 6 months, whether it's retail, whether it's businesses, multinationals. It's all about trying to help sectors of society that are struggling through COVID financially. And the horse racing and greyhound racing is no different. And they need support, especially at this time. And I just want to commend the horse racing industry in terms of, since they've got racing back in June, when a decision was made by government to let them race again, albeit behind closed doors. But it's given an awful lot of joy to people. So look, I've a number of questions actually, just in terms of, because as you know yourself, people who own animals and who own horses and who own greyhounds, they're animal lovers. And they treat their animals with huge respect. And I know from a department perspective, animal welfare and issues related to animal welfare are very important. And could you just develop when you reply on how the department will monitor how much is being spent by the RCE on welfare, because it is very central. And just maybe if you could develop, or if you could expand just on the traceability and what the traceability system will provide for. And will there be a traceability system for all the greyhounds? And then in terms of greyhound tracks, will the restaurant facilities at the stadiums, will they operate in accordance with COVID-19 protocols? In my opinion, the restaurants, their arrangements should operate as a single operation within the stadiums, as was the case in July and August of this year. And then my final question would be just on a local issue in Clonmel as well. What's the position regarding the private racetracks? We've 6 of them around the country in Lifford, Longford, Thurles, Enniscorthy, Kilkenny, Dundalk, but Clonmel as well. And as you know yourself, there's been ongoing issues in terms of Clonmel racetrack and with the Davis Road Greyhound Stadium, and that they've had engagement to try and come up with a resolution. And there was a new stadium built there in the early 2000s. And I think it's important from the perspective of people who are part of that consortium, who've put an awful lot of effort in over the last number of years just to try and keep that stadium afloat and try to keep it going. Can you just confirm, or can you give an indication yourself that you would agree with me that the importance of greyhound tracks like Clonmel need to be protected, need to be supported, and that there needs to be real engagement between both sides to make sure that there's a resolution and that Clonmel Greyhound track can be supported going forward. But look, thank you very much, Minister, and I welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Ahearn. Our next speaker is Senator Byrne. Please,
Firstly, I want to thank you, Cathaoirleach. I want to welcome the Minister to the House. We met yesterday evening and the Joint Oaks Committee on Agriculture, and we discussed this issue at length. So I'm not going to repeat some of the issues I said there, but just to say at the very outset, I have an interest in racing myself and would be a regular goer of Punchestown, the Currie and Naas, all in County Kildare, and of course Leopardstown. It's quite close to where I live. So I just want to put that on the record. I am a supporter of the industry, and I want to spend most of my really talking about horse racing and the work of Horse Racing Ireland. Horse racing and breeding are of course an integral part of agriculture and our rural life and our rural development and our rural economy, and are usually connected directly and indirectly in relation to rural employment. And for those who don't know, that over 90% of all owners of brood mares in this country are farmers who have less than 4 animals. That's extraordinary. That indicates the issue. Right across this country, there are farmers holding brood mares, very, very successful breeding programs. So it's not to suggest that this breeding and the holding of brood mares is centralised by 10, 15 studs. They do, of course, contribute enormously to it, but 95% of people who hold less than 4 broodmares on their farms, and I think that's a particularly important thing to suggest. The export of horses, of course, both export and inward investment is enormous. International owners choose to avail of this country for their equestrian and horse activity in breeding terms. Yes, there are attractive tax regimes in place for that, but you've got to put that up against the success in terms of the income, particularly employment in rural communities, where it's quite difficult to get it. There is, of course, the online issue of betting and the revenue that brings in, and it's been suggested that betting revenue is well in excess of 100 million from betting revenue. So there is an income coming in terms of betting around the industry itself. Minister, I said it yesterday, and I'm asking you again. I had a look this morning at the Indicon report. Indicon consultants carried out a very extensive report in relation both to Irish racing and also the HRI, but also in relation to the greyhound industry. And there are issues around that I think need to be revisited again. I don't suggest we need another report in relation to horses or greyhounds. I suggest we dust down the Indicon report in both cases, relating to both sectors. Also, Deloitte carried out a very extensive report and made numerous recommendations in relation to Horse Racing Ireland, and I think they need to be looked at. I don't think we can talk about this sector without touching on animal welfare. And I think we're giving substantial 96 million has been approved in the budget, and of course the provision in the 2001 Act is that it gets the approval of both houses of the Oireachtas. So here, we're doing that here today. And I think there should be some conditionality, some expectation, some way of measuring animal welfare issues around this funding, because I think that's terribly important. I note, Minister, from this draft copy of the statutory instrument that we are discussing and you're going to sign, along with Minister Pascal Donoghue and Minister Micheál McGrath, the issue, and you mentioned yourself, the cumulative aggregate effect of all of this money will be 1.46 billion euros to racing and dogs on an 20% break. But that's a huge amount of money, and I don't have a difficulty with it in terms of the sport and the breeding and the economy and the benefits of it. But it is an enormous amount of public money at the end of the day. So therefore, the conditionality in relation to this is something that I'd ask you to look at again. 96 million approved by the Dáil in the budget, that's been provided for. A number of people have suggested to me there are issues around governance in relation to both these organisations. I've had a look at the Controller Auditor General's report, and I am now satisfied, having looked at the most recent one that's waiting, I understand, in your desk to be signed, in relation to the audit financial statements for Horse Racing Ireland and the greyhound industry, and I'm happy, having read them thoroughly, and the protections and the guidance and the reassurances that the Controller Auditor General has given us. And I think that's comfort to be able to say that the Controller Auditor General has looked at these accounts, has issued his reports, and has strong, healthy recommendations in reports, and I think that's worth having. Finally, Minister, I just want to say two things. Horse Racing Ireland have an amazing strategic plan, and for those who don't have it, I think they should get it. I think it's really important that we look at it. I think we keep it to the fore. I'm giving a commitment here that I will continue to keep this issue to the fore on the Joint Oireachtas Committee, as I know my other colleagues here will do. But finally, I'll ask you, Minister, there is an issue of the tripartite agreement in relation to the movement of bloodstock, and currently it's around 25,000 a year between the UK, from Ireland, the UK and France. And that's a very, very insignificant transport route in terms of racing, but also in terms of breeding and the toing and froing of animals coming up through Europe, but mostly from France. So the tripart arrangement, as you would be well aware of, exists between France, the United Kingdom and Ireland. And things will change on the 1st of January with Brexit. And we're already having discussions about this, and people in the sector are seriously concerned. So I'd ask if you would share with us, with the Seanad here today, how are those talks going? How are we going to have a resolution, or find a resolution, to the movement of bloodstock across this country into the UK and down by shipment and down into France and on road, of course? So that's a critical question, Minister, I'd like if you'd give some attention to. But again, I want to thank you for coming to the House. I want to thank you for your very, very comprehensive speech in relation to these matters.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Byrne. And now, Senator Eugene Murphy, please.
Good last, Cathaoirleach, and I want to welcome Minister McConlough here this evening. and thank him as the Senior Minister to come here to discuss an issue I know that is quite passionate, and there will be some different views. But as always in this House, I know that will be respectful from every side, and that, we'll hopefully reach a consensus at the end of the day. I think most people would agree that the horse and greyhound racing industries have a special place in Irish life, and indeed a fundamental position in Irish sport. They are crucial to our economy, intrinsic to our identity, and landmarks in our social and cultural heritage. There is an undeniable passion and enthusiasm for those sports all across the country. It has been a long-standing policy of successive governments to ensure these industries to realise their maximum potential, and in doing so, play a part in the economic and social development across our nation. And I would remind this chamber that included Fianna Fail governments, Fine Gael Labour governments, Fine Gael Labour Workers' Parties government, Fine Gael, Fianna Fail PDs, and now the present government, Fianna Fail, Fine Gael and the Greens. So right along the reign of governments in this country, there has been support for the industry. Given the wide geographical dispersal of those two industries, they're important to the achievement of more balanced regional growth. And in this context, a considerable contribution of those industries make our rural economic activity and employment have to be acknowledged. Now, if you look at the racing scene, my own county, Roscommon, Sligo, Ballinrobe and Mayo, Kilbeggan and Westmeath, Limerick, Navan and Meath, Wexford, Tipperary, Thurles, all around this country, there is a number of race meetings each year, and I'm not mentioning the Dublin venues in that. The Currie and Kildare is another one. And one must remember that the volume of economic activity created by those events is very important to our economy. And if you were to calculate between the horse industry, the greyhound industry, and linked jobs to that industry, we are talking about 30,000 jobs plus. 30,000 jobs plus if you take everything into account. And I've done my own calculations on this. Now, again, with the greyhound situation, and listen, I understand the passion of some people in relation to animal welfare, and I think we all accept, in some areas, animal welfare was an issue. I think we all accept that around this chamber. But again, in relation to the greyhound business, we have 14 stadiums around the country. The likes of the Mullingars, the Galways, I think the Longford one is gone now. Again, you have them in Tipperary, Cork, you have them right around the country, you have them here in Dublin. Again, the fact that you have a number of those meetings throughout the year generates a lot of economic activity in those particular areas, and also has a considerable amount of jobs. I think it is important that we look at COVID and what COVID, as the Minister has said, has done to the business. And like every other part of Irish society, there will be an impact, significant impact, I should say, in relation to COVID. And it is important that when we talk about the increased funding in this area, that we must realise that there has been a huge dent in the amount of money created in that business. Before I conclude, I do want to address the issue of animal welfare. And I acknowledge what the Minister has said here, that in terms of all monies granted to those boards, animal welfare has to be a serious consideration. Now, when we look at animal welfare in recent times, we have to take into account there has been a lot of progress. A lot of things have happened, and I'll give you a few of them. So if we look at the Greyhound Racing Act 2019, we have a traceability model to enable tracing of racing greyhounds throughout their lives. The board tendered for the establishment of a traceability system for racing greyhounds in early 2020, and it is expected that the traceability system will be delivered to RCE, which is Rossfield Con Éireann, probably very, very shortly. Incentivising and rehoming of greyhounds in Ireland through additional supports through the Irish Retired Greyhound Trust is established and operated by RCE. The establishment of a separate greyhound care fund and the opening of care centres for retired greyhounds while they are awaiting rehoming. The welfare of greyhounds remains a priority for RCE and was a key consideration during the suspension of racing activity. Between the 24th of March and the 8th of June 2020, RC implemented a COVID-19 greyhound care payment scheme of €2 per day in respect of each active greyhound. The Department of Agriculture has received assurances that the Board remains committed to the protection of this integrity of the greyhound industry and to promoting the welfare of greyhounds. The Department is also assured that all necessary resources are being committed to those ends. Greyhound Racing Ireland has been implementing an ambitious care and welfare programme with the following elements being progressed: the setting up of a care fund in 2019, notwithstanding the collapse in commercial revenues arising from the impact of COVID-19 and resulting impact on care fund income, Greyhound Racing is committed to increasing the spend on care and welfare as part of its overall programme. And there are many other issues I could mention. But can I say in conclusion, people of Ireland, I think, love their animals. People of rural Ireland, and I was brought up on a farm where I was brought up with a love of animals, a love of cattle, a love of sheep, a love of your dog, a love of your horse when we'd have a horse on the land. All small farmers from humble backgrounds, and I think the Irish people are the same today. So I am totally in favour of the welfare of animals and improving that all along, but we must be resolute in supporting both the horse and greyhound industry. There are a lot of jobs at stake here, but I do admit that we have to also be very, very serious about the welfare issue. Gormagat.
Anish an kid in Seanad Annie Hoey leather hell.
Thank you. If you forgive me, I was trying to transcribe onto my piece of paper because the printer didn't work, so I'm going to be hopping from one thing to the other. I'll not take too long, Minister. Every time I stand up here, it's a little bit like a case of Annie's confessions. What personal anecdote I can bring here today that is informing my political views. And it is not any particular secret, and I'm going to focus on one particular area, that my own views on animal rights, they're not a particular secret. I assume, like many people in this House, abhor animal cruelty and personally believe that we have a long way to go towards living in harmony with our furry, scaly and winged friends. And I don't want to stray too far from the topic at hand, so I'll just keep to the issue around animal welfare. We are a country of animal lovers. However, we're also a country that has had a poor track record in terms of accountability when it comes to animal cruelty. There are no circumstances, anecdotally, personal or even commercial, where it should be permissible to excuse or overlook animal cruelty in Ireland. I do think we have relatively decent pro-animal legislation here in Ireland, but I would contend that we have woefully poor enforcement sometimes of that legislation. Every now and again, an image appears online of some dreadful, heinous animal cruelty, a poor mare, and hooves overgrown, all these different things, and everyone piles on and goes, my God, that's terrible, that's awful, that's horrific, the poor animals, whatever can we do about it? And it really is not terribly often that the perpetrators are held to account, and there's a variety of reasons for that, whether it be tracing or other things, but we really do not hold, I believe, the perpetrators of animal cruelty to account the way that I think we could and should do so. And I think one of the reasons for that, Minister, is that it takes money to do this effectively. The Health and Welfare Act 2013 was a significant step forward for animal welfare in Ireland. The ISPCA and the DSPCA inspectors are authorised officers under this Act. They can instigate investigations into cruelty, but these charities, and they are charities, only have enough funding for a small team of inspectors, making it impossible to enforce this law effectively across the country. All welfare charities have to share roughly about $3 million. The rest is done on goodwill, volunteers and fundraising, and my family fundraises regularly for Drogheda Animal Rescue, a small organisation in desperate need of funding to help the animals that are in their care. So I have to confess, when I hear some of the eye-watering figures that have been reference today in relation to the industry that we are discussing, I find myself kind of reeling, thinking about my poor mother standing on West Street in Drogheda for a Flag Day, trying to raise money so that we can feed some animals in the care. Like, there's a lot of money that's been invested into this industry, and I would posit that perhaps we really need to consider how much money we're investing into animal welfare, because when you hear the figures of billions and then we compare the figures of a couple of million for animal welfare for some of the charities, that is an enormous gap. And as I said, animal welfare charities do all of this very often off their own bat, of the goodwill of volunteers, and not a lot of state support. So, as I said, I don't think we do really enough on animal welfare in Ireland, and this is as I said, your responsibility, Minister, so I'm switching to this where my notes are. Just some of the other things I think that we do need to do when we're talking about this and around things of animal welfare, things like microchipping of dogs. Local authorities spend an enormous amount of time having to try and chase up where dogs have come from. This will deal with issues around pounds. And proper resourcing for staff in the Department of Agriculture and local authorities is key to the full enforcement of the Animal Health and Welfare Act and the Dog Breeding Establishments Act and equine legislation. We don't need to have a nanny state where we're chasing after every single animal owner. The vast majority of animal owners are good, kind people, and people here have referenced animal lovers who are involved in this industry, but we do need better resourcing and support, particularly in that sector. And the people who flout the law really do need to be held to account. I don't think there's anyone here who would disagree with that. And it's very frustrating, I'm sure, as people involved in this industry and not involved in this industry, seeing people giving animal lovers a very bad name. And we've heard the discourse over the past week over this, and unfortunately the really serious incidents of cruelty and abhorrent treatment of animals come to the fore, and those people seem to just get away with it, and that does drive people's personal conviction around this area. So I'm aware that I've gone somewhat off keel, but I thought I would just focus on the animal welfare issue. And I would say that there needs to be tougher sentencing for those found guilty of animal cruelty. There should be higher fines, jail sentences, and really for the most serious cases, life bans of keeping animals to stop those found guilty of animal abuse from re-offending. So I suppose I'll leave those comments in your hand, Minister. There's a lot of people talking today about the people behind this industry, so I thought I would just take a moment to reflect on the animals behind this industry for whom you also have a responsibility as the Minister. And I would suggest some of the areas around funding for the charities that are responsible for the animal welfare that sometimes get left dealing with the knock-off consequences of this industry, to look at how we can fund that better and support those people who are doing really important work around animal welfare and charities, to find a way that this can be quite a divisive issue and people are on both sides of it, but people who come to this from a genuine love and care for animal welfare would really, I think, appreciate seeing the Department and you, Minister, taking that very seriously and really putting to the fore of the agenda that animal welfare, that we are a nation of animal lovers, and that as a government we are willing to put our money where our mouth is and to ensure that there is the adequate funding to ensure that all animals are taken care of. Thank you, Minister.
Senator Byrne, please.
Agus Fáilte Minister, and I too was raising matters of greyhound welfare in the Agricultural Committee yesterday. And today I'm also going to speak on the matter of animal welfare, and particularly in the greyhound sector, and in opposition to this increase in funding of €2.4 million to the greyhound industry, which brings the amount of public funds that they will receive to €19.2 million. And I understand, and there are members here today, and they're rightly saying the importance of the greyhound sector to the local economy and to particularly for rural jobs. However, it can't be denied that the attendance levels at greyhound race meetings have dropped by 55% since 2008. So I'm no expert, okay, but an industry that's faced with that type of decline in interest surely has to stop and ask themselves, what's going on? Why are people turning off from what we have to offer? And I'm no fan of greyhound racing. Personally, it's not my bag. I don't like rugby either, but at least rugby players get a choice in the matter of participating. But I do know a lot of people who love greyhound racing. And I know a lot of people who've attended racetracks as part of their work outings and social gatherings. And I'll tell you one thing that continues to come up as to why those type of social gatherings are becoming less popular in workplaces and for communion parties and confirmation parties and birthday parties, and it's down to people being turned off by the issues of animal welfare. And I'm sure positive that the majority of greyhound owners treat their animals very, very well, but we cannot ignore that we have very serious issues around animal welfare in this country, and particularly in the industry. In 2009, on the back of a disgusted greyhound breeder that turned whistleblower, The Sun ran a story about unwanted retired greyhounds being shot with bolt guns for as little as €10. In 2019, RTE broadcast an expose called Running for Their Lives that showed that in the 10 years, very, very little had improved on the situation. And despite protestations by the Irish Greyhound Board about that programme, the Broadcasting Authority dismissed the complaints and found that the programme was fair, impartial and balanced. And a year on, and yes, the RCE will say that the situation has improved since that show, that they're ring-fencing funding for animal welfare, that they're implementing a traceability system, that they're setting up care centres and working with animal welfare organisations to rehome the retired greyhounds. However, there are still concerns regarding that industry, and any public funding that goes to an industry, the public has a right to know that it comes with full transparency, accountability and the highest possible standard of animal welfare. Because the 10% care fund that we keep hearing about from RCE, it includes the cost of setting up and managing the traceability system. Now, anyone in industry can tell you that traceability, if that's a requirement of your industry, that's an operating cost. That's not an animal welfare cost, and it shouldn't be coming from the animal welfare budget. And it's also vital that when this public traceability system goes up, that it will be completely publicly accessible, that the greyhound will be followed from birth to retirement to death. There needs to be an independent, rigorous inspection system of all greyhound breeders, with regular reporting in a timely manner on, again, a publicly accessible database. And while I would much rather that the RCE Code of Conduct was put on a statutory basis, the bare minimum that we should expect is that any individuals who are involved in the receipt of or distribution of the money that comes from that care fund, which is public money, should be in full compliance of the RCE Code of Conduct. And I would hope that if evidence emerges, and I would recommend people maybe do a bit of Googling to show that there are people out there who are not in compliance with the Code of Conduct, then they should be removed from any role involving the management or receipt of the Animal Welfare Fund. And that includes breaching the Code of Conduct in relation to the sale or export of greyhounds to countries that do not have similar or higher standards of animal welfare. And I also find that it is ridiculous that we're giving public money to an industry that deliberately overbreeds and then praises themselves for using the same public money that we've given them to overbreed to address the consequences of the overbreeding. It's completely inappropriate that thousands of greyhounds are bred every year, only to be then sent to shelters for rehoming, including transporting them across the Atlantic to the US, and what that might do for carbon footprints. Greyhound breeders are repeatedly given permission for their bitches to breed in excess of what is recommended and set out in law under the Welfare of Greyhounds Act. There absolutely has to be a cap on the number of greyhounds being bred. It is simply unsustainable to produce 6,000 dogs every year and then expect to find homes for them. These animals live for 14 years. Where are all these dogs going? Where are we rehoming them? Because yes, we all know greyhounds make great pets. They are beautiful animals, but they're sight hounds, so they need particular requirements. So I'm saying to you, Minister, the greyhound industry has a choice. They can clean up their act. They can implement a humane breeding policy. They can have full traceability and accountability, or they continue with this business-as-usual approach. And all that's going to happen is more and more people are going to get turned off from the industry. They are turning away in their droves, and they're turning away because of the animal welfare issues. So for those of you who are interested in the jobs, and I get that, and I get it's important for rural jobs, you need to clean up your act. You need to address the animal welfare. That's the only way that this will be sustainable. Public money cannot come without standards and without the evidence to date. I cannot justify any increase in funding to the industry. And I agree with Senator Hoey. There are animal welfare organisations who are doing incredible work on a pittance. I know others spoke for longer than I did, and they could do with the 2.4 million.
On Kate Concherell, Senator Pauline O'Reilly, I gather you want to share time. Are you proposing to share time?
Yes, Laska Hirlik, I'd like to share time 3 and 3 with Senator Martin.
With Senator Vincent P. Martin. Is that agreed by the House? Agreed. Senator O'Reilly, please.
Thank you. I'm sure people are quite anxious to hear the views of the Green Party today, and I think you'd be forgiven for actually listening to Senator Boylan there arguing almost against the greyhound industry, when in fact our own party are in favour of the greyhound industry, as in fact are Labour and Fianna Fail and Fine Gael. We're in a situation here where we don't have the political will in order to ban an industry that we would like to see the end of. Now, we have very different views in relation to horse racing, and I'm going to let my party colleague here speak about that. And I fundamentally don't understand the argument that you would support an industry and support funding to an industry, but not support workers in the time of COVID. So that's the first thing I'll say. But really what I want to talk about is welfare, because that's really what's close to my heart, and that's what's close to the Green Party's heart. We argued and fought our corner in a programme for government negotiations and have the biggest support for animal welfare in this programme for government. Many have mentioned here the welfare organisations who are struggling. I completely concur that they are struggling. But we have in the programme for government a doubling of funding for animal welfare organisations within 2 years. That has never happened before in a programme for government. Also the phasing out of fur farming, the ending of badger culling, and many other measures, including enforcement of laws, and Senator Hoey mentioned it. There are laws there, but they're not actually enforced. They're not actually enforced, and that's what we need to actually address. We also want to see new policies and new laws put into place, and part of that is to develop an urban horse welfare programme, which I know that many of people who have been on city councils will know that we have an issue around horse welfare in our cities and in our towns as well. I believe that the Minister, when he says that he is going to address the issue around the welfare of dogs within the industry, because it is fundamental to the Green Party, and we believe that under this government we will see an end to the kind of cruelty that was on display in the RTE programme that many have mentioned was on last year. We can see rehoming programmes, we can see homes for retired dogs, and see an end to the killing of animals that we all love and have in our homes and profess to care for. So I'm going to, without any further mention of that, I'm going to leave it to my Senator colleague to speak about horse racing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator O'Reilly. Senator Martin, that was impeccable timing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Laska Hirlock. Minister, I'm sure you're aware the very fine Kildare equine tradition is second to none, not just in Ireland, but in the world. Its potential is probably still unfulfilled. It should be the world leader and HQ of the equine industry. If you put together what the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield means to snooker, Alexander Palace means to darts, and the Wembley Stadium means to soccer, FA Cup final, you would still not fully appreciate the love, the care of horses in Kildare, and also the economic dividend. Horse Sport Ireland is working very hard, as you know, Minister, under the able stewardship of Joe Reynolds and many others like Miss Avalon Everett, John Moran, doing very well, great work in COVID times. But they would like, and they have about 25 affiliates, including horse breeding, they would like to have that put on a statutory, regulatory footing. Like 14,000 jobs are generated by his activities. 816 million generated income each year. We will have 3 separate teams that qualified for the Olympics next year, from dressage to show jumping to eventing, plus the Paralympic dressage. And then if you go to their spiritual cousins, horse racing, over 1 billion generated from horse racing, over 28,000 direct, indirect, secondary jobs, 1.3 million attendees at Irish racing, 1.84 billion total direct and indirect stimulus for the Irish economy. Of course, expenditure by racegoers is estimated to be 145 million. So my one appeal today is Horse Sport Ireland in Naas, they're doing great work, but they have a temporary home. I would not like to see Horse Sport Ireland leave the county. We need a collaborative approach. We would urge you, Minister, and I appreciate this will be a cross-departmental approach from tourism to sport to agriculture. We already have Martin Hayden very enthusiastic about this and always was. Junior Minister Hayden in my neighbouring Kildare South constituency. And I hope that Horsesport Ireland, it's like what Crowe Park and Semple Stadium, they're the spiritual home of the GA. The spiritual home of the horse is Kildare. We don't want to see it fragmented. We don't want to see Horsesport Ireland relocate its HQ outside the county. For instance, Punchestown. Now, I live very close by. They do great work there, very generous to the public to use it, walking and share it with so many other amenities and local communities. Under David Mungy and so many others, both past and his predecessors, have put Punchestown on the map. They have lots of space, huge potential in a collaborative approach, from mounted games to pony clubs to disabled riders, have a HQ only on a far bigger scale than Abbottstown. They have lots of land, huge potential. You would bring tourism throughout the world to Punchestown if we can sit down with you, Minister, and make sure we don't miss this opportunity. And I forgot to congratulate you. I know you're a passionate Cavan man, and you had a brilliant week, as had Tipperary, and commiserations to the Minister from Donegal.
That's very gallant of you. Thank you very much. Very sporting. Thank you. Senator Rowan, I understand you're next. I understand you want to share time. Is that okay?
4 and 2, please.
4 and 2. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Laska Hirlock, and thank you, Minister, for being in the Seanad today. I do welcome that we've been given the opportunity to debate the motion today. This was an opportunity, unfortunately, denied to our colleagues in the Dáil. I imagine the denial of such a debate was the impetus behind the motion on the greyhound racing industry brought before the Dáil this morning by Deputy Cairns and the Social Democrats, an extremely important and worthwhile initiative that I wholeheartedly support. The motion before us is straightforward. It authorises almost €1.5 billion to the Horse and Greyhound Fund under the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001. However, what was not being provided to us in any real way is an adequate level of justification from government of, firstly, the decision to continue to provide such substantial state financial support to a loss-making industry with a long structural record of cruelty to animals, and secondly, to actually increase that allocation to the industry by over €2.5 million compared to 2019. We have all seen the RTE and spoke to the RTE Investigates documentary from last year, which details the truly appalling and unspeakable acts of violence committed against animals as part of this industry. It's an industry that kills over 6,000 dogs a year simply for not running fast enough. I cannot comprehend how an industry that has so conclusively been proved to be using such widespread cruel practices would be rewarded with increased funding. It's just unfathomable. If the RTE programme has not been deemed as sufficient grounds for radical reform, I do wonder what it would take. What additional cruelty would have to be revealed before the government would consider reviewing state funding to such an industry? This is an industry that received over 6 times more state money than the total state funding allocated to animal welfare organisations combined. If the level of abuse and mistreatment revealed on the RTE Investigates programme does not give pause for pursuing a stated policy of continuing and increasing funding to the greyhound industry, then what would it actually take? Even if we set aside the decision to increase funding and only consider the extraordinary level of state support given to the industry, I'm strongly of the view that public funds have to be used in a way that promotes the public good. What public good is served in this case? In Fergus Finley's article from the Irish Examiner yesterday, the average attendance rate at a race meeting was 288 people per race. This comes after a decade of sharp declines in attendance that leaves Ireland as only one of a handful of countries in the world that allows dog racing. This industry is failing and we are choosing to prop it up, and for what purpose? I recognise that the industry employs many people across the country, particularly in rural Ireland, the vast majority of whom likely have a great love and affection for animals. But the revelations over recent years show that ultimately the fundamental structure of the industry is one built on exploitation and cruelty of the animals at its very centre. We would fully be able to gradually unwind state support for the overall industry while also providing alternative employment and educational opportunities for the industry's workers. much as is being done for those affected by the Byrne and Mona closures. This is doable if the political will was there and if the government were willing to act. In the last Oireachtas, we passed the Greyhound Racing Act 2019. The Seanad played a leading role in strengthening and improving that legislation and to improve the provisions relating to dog welfare. We proposed a ban on the export of greyhounds to countries with terrible welfare records, and this was rejected by the government. I would urge the government to use this opportunity provided by this new national debate to reconsider such a ban, easily justifiable under EU trade law, through the Article 36 exemptions to unitary trade action by a member state explicitly on animal welfare grounds. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Senator Higgins.
We've heard about the improvements in welfare.
I've been informed that we should technically ask the House to agree to the sharing of time. Do you agree?
Perfect. I might take 10 seconds at the end just to allocate for that. We've heard.
Already got those extras.
Yes, well, I would say, if I can commence now. We've heard about the improvements to welfare in the industry, and I think it's really important to be clear. Any of these improvements to welfare have not come about by goodwill or a sudden revelation, and they haven't even come about simply because a documentary exposed the horror of the current practices within the greyhound industry. The changes in terms of greyhound welfare have happened because the industry was made to change. Senator Ruane talked about the fact that we pushed for a ban on exports of greyhound when the Greyhound Racing Bill was going through this last Oireachtas. We didn't succeed in getting that at that time, but what we did succeed, with Senator Ruane and myself, with the support of others, in getting a requirement for a vet on the board of the Irish Greyhound Board and a requirement for retirement and rehoming planning. That is the reason that there is a rehoming strategy right now for Byrne. It's because they were required to produce a rehoming strategy. And that is why we need a strong, firmer, driving regulatory approach to these issues. We've heard about the community and rural activity in relation to racing. Let's be clear, it is an industrial scale. It is not a community activity when you are breeding 6,000 dogs a year for execution because they're not fast enough. That's industrial scale activity. It is not community activity. There is perhaps a role for the continuation of this industry, but only if it completely changes. And that's why I support the proposals that Deputy Kearns was bringing through the Dáil, because what she was bringing was proposals to say, let's transition this sector, let's scale it down and make it something that is actually something that can never be defended, which it can't be currently. I would also note that at a time of huge need in animal welfare and others, as people have said, the state subsidising this. Additionally, the betting levy, which has gone down from a 10% levy to 2% currently, 10% in 1999, a 2% levy now in the betting industry. Ladbrokes made 720 million in profits this year.
Thank you.
If there is to be additional funding, let it come from those who profit from the suffering of the greyhounds, the betting industry, and not from the public exchequer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Higgins. Senator Daly, please.
I suppose for the record of the House, just to declare, I have an interest in the sector. I am the acting voluntary chairman of Quebec and Racecourse. I would fit into Senator Boyhan's category of horse breeders with one brood mare.
Sorry, I should point out it's now 4 minutes per speech.
I fit into the category of breeder with being the owner of one brood mare and her offspring, which I could call very slow horses. But I have a severe and serious interest in the sector. And I take exception to some of the remarks made here today, while I know they were made in good faith and with the best of intentions for the sector. They seem to be all related to the animal welfare side and all seem to emanate from the famous primetime programme. While I cannot and would not justify anything that was on that programme, there were a rogue element. 99.9% of animal owners, horse or greyhound, would, and I would stand accused of this in my own house, of treating them better, having more time for them, and certainly spending more money on them than I do on the humans who live in that house. And I'm not alone in that. And I think it's very unfair that those good owners and trainers and animal lovers art hard with the one brush. Now, as a result, and I want to compliment Senator Riley, I can see exactly where she's coming from. She spoke eminently. Politically, we won't agree on the issue, but there won't be the breadth of a cigarette paper between us when it comes to dealing with animal welfare issues during the term of the next government. On the back of the programme, the famous programme that keeps getting quoted, we had numerous meetings and inquiries, and Minister, you were on the committee with me in the last term in the Agricultural Committee. The Greyhound Racing Act was introduced. It has to be given a chance to come to fruition. Byrne and gone, as the word at the time, now RCE, were before the committee. They changed their governance. They changed their input into how they were dealing with animal welfare. They are introducing a traceability system, which is long overdue and probably should have been there before, but it is coming now. And it will be comparable to the bovine traceable system, which works 100%. You can trace your calf from birth right through life to death. One group who never got a mention here today, and I'm not going to go down the side of the jobs in the industry because they're all facts, and without them rural Ireland would be dead. There are two groups who never got a mention here today, horses and greyhounds. They are natural racers, jumpers, runners. What do we do if we don't continue with these industries, and we don't support the industries, and we don't love the animals and train them and mind them to do what they were born to do, what is in their natural DNA? Putting a greyhound in a pen behind a house or running around a garden is not enough. A greyhound is born, it's in his DNA, or his or her nature, to run, to race, to actually hunt. A horse is the same. We stand them in a field and look at them, it's in their DNA to run, to race, to jump. And once they are minded, once the husbandry is correct, which as I say it is with 99.9% of the people who have them, that's what the horse and greyhound want to do also. And I fully support the funding. And I would just ask you two questions, Minister. The additional funding is COVID related. It's vitally important you work with HRI and the greyhound people, that money filters down to the people who suffered most through the COVID. And they will be the small breeders, the small trainers, the small owners, the breeders who can't sell their horses now because the sales were moved to England because that's the market. The second question I want to ask is related to Brexit and animal welfare within Brexit. The tripartite arrangement was mentioned. I hope that it still stands after Brexit is negotiated. But what we're hearing on an ongoing basis, irrespective of the outcome of Brexit, we're going to have long queues at our ports. The transportation of horses, in particular, the thoroughbred, they're a very finicky animal out of their environment. We have to try and involve a slip lane for the transportation of livestock and bloodstock through our ports if we do witness the delays which are being predicted.
Thank you very much, Senator Daly. We'll actually get everyone in if we're very strict on adherence to time. Now, Senator Buttimer, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and can I welcome the Minister to the House and to support this piece of legislation. Minister, the horse and greyhound fund, as we've heard, is controversial, and I understand and appreciate the sentiment of some of my colleagues here. But I think it is important to put the context of this debate in that Sports Ireland have allocated 85 million for sport in our country, which all of us would herald and promote and would support. And today we're announcing funding to a greyhound and horse industry that does provide jobs, that does provide support, that does provide enjoyment, that many of us have an interest in, and I was the owner of a greyhound, or a part owner of a greyhound one time, a couple of times. And Senator Daly is right. Those of us who owned animals and who own animals are absolutely concerned about the welfare during and after racing of the animal. And I would like, if we could in the debate, not divide and conquer, but base it on real facts. And we're basing it upon, in some parts, a programme that none of us would condone what happened. We would condemn it out of hand by a minority, a rogue element. And I would agree with Senator Daly regarding the points made by Senator Riley. I think that they're well made. But let us ensure, Cathaoirleach, that we see the 50% increase that government have given in budget 21 to animal welfare, allied to the work of Greyhound Racing Ireland in terms of traceability, animal welfare, to support an industry. And Senator Boylan is right. There is a fundamental difficulty, and that's why the Indicon report was published. And if you read the Indicon report, it says that in Great Britain, New Zealand, Western Australia and New South Wales, over the past decade, there's been a decline internationally in greyhound racing. And you are right, and I completely concur with you in this. The issue of animal welfare, Minister, is one that we universally must tackle. But we shouldn't demonise the industry by rogue elements. And that's the fundamental point. The other point I would make, Cathaoirleach, is, and I want to commend Councillors Aidan Lynch and David McManus for their work around greyhound welfare. And I'll make the point to members in the House here. Stand in the Curragh on Derby Day, or stand over in Cheltenham on Gold Cup Day, or go over to Melbourne, or go over to Kentucky. Look at the acclaim the Irish horse receives. Breeding, competitiveness, winning, and our jockeys with them. And are we saying to an element we want to get rid of all of that? I hope we don't. Minister, the Indicon report in the greyhound industry requires a root and branch reform. And I'm talking about in the context of Cork, with Cork Track and Niall. And I would hope, Minister, that as part of your remit, that we can look at how we can transform in a post-COVID world, or in a new world with COVID, the use of that track in Cork and Niall, to promote it, to use it as a source of conferences, to become an income-generating revenue for the greyhound industry, to promote what we're talking about. And I'll finish on this, Cathaoirleach. To those who say there's been no change, look at the whole issue around animal welfare, the halfway house, the rehoming programme, the financial incentive for rehoming of greyhounds, the foster to adopt scheme, the track financial support scheme, the phone line where people can phone confidentially welfare issues, the track financial support scheme for injuries in greyhounds, the education allowance being given, the code of practice for the care and welfare of the greyhound, all done, all being implemented. And as Senator Daly said, the traceability element is one we must pursue to the right to get it finished. But could I ask the members of the House, could I invite you all who are opposed to this piece of legislation, come down to Coolmore, come down and talk to the owners of greyhounds and horses and see what it really means to us all. Please do that. Let's not demonise one another. This is a very important industry that our country requires, and we will make changes. We have made changes. Now,
Senator Keoghan.
And Minister Charlie, you're very welcome in here. This is our first time to get to address you, and I wish you every success in your ministerial post. I welcome the opportunity to speak in favour of the motion to provide state funding to Horse Racing Ireland and Greyhound Racing Ireland in 2021. Horse racing, the thoroughbred industry and greyhound racing are vibrant and important parts of the culture and the economy of this country, particularly the rural economy and rural life. We have a long and proud tradition of horse racing in Ireland. Indeed, steeplechase began in Ireland in 1752 in Cork. Horse racing in Bellewstown in County Meath, which I'm a member of that, a volunteer member of that committee, took place in 1726. And the money that we get from Horse Racing Ireland every year is constantly improving the facilities there with regard to animal welfare. So we welcome that. Horse racing provides direct and indirect employment of some 29,000 people and generates €1.9 billion annually for the economy. Ireland is the third biggest producer of thoroughbred foals in the world, and we attract significant interest and investment globally as a result of our high standing in this sector. Significant employment and economic benefit is derived from greyhound racing too. Now, the Green Party might be more appropriately called the Grey Party. They seem to be hell-bent on draining rural life out of every bit of colour and human vibrancy. They tried to, I should say, kill off the hunt in this country, and now they seem to want to kill off the greyhound racing too. What is next on the list? Are we going to be banned from fishing in our lakes and rivers? Nobody supports cruelty to animals, and of course I support any reasonable measures to ensure animal welfare. It's interesting some of the members here today speaking about animal cruelty and animal welfare, and talking about the 6,000 dogs that are killed each year, yet they show no compassion or remorse for the 6,600 babies that are killed and funded by the HSE every year. Sorry, this is I didn't interrupt you, Senator Lynn. I think it's very unfair of you to do that. Okay, I find it astonishing that they would support something like this and bring it in. I'm really astonished by it. Not only are some members of this House trying to depopulate us as a population with abortion, they now want to target breeders to be curtailed on how many pups they breed as well. At the same time as supporting any reasonable measure to guarantee animal welfare, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that the overwhelming majority of farmers, horse and dog breeders love their animals and care for them properly. I believe it is right to support these important industries that are part of our culture and our history. They provide entertainment, employment and economic benefit. So I'm quite happy to support this measure today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Keoghan. Now, my sincere apologies to colleagues, but by order of the House, this is ending now, so the Minister is on now, unless... I didn't design the order. Sorry, Senator Burke, Senator Burke, a moment.
Getting in on the debate.
Yeah, I will. The people who are not now getting to speak are Senator Cummins, Senator Burke and Senator Sarah Carney.
It's really important that our colleague David McManus was called a liar in the Dáil today, and that record needs to be corrected in the figures that the Minister has said in his statement were correct, and our colleague has said exactly the same figures for employment.
Sorry, Senator Carney. So that's where we're at. Okay, they're the named people who couldn't get in. Minister.
Thank you very much, Cahill. I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to the debate in the House this afternoon. I think it certainly was. It was very important that the debate was had. It's important that there's oversight in terms of all the spending we do, and it's important that there's oversight in relation to the spending of the Horse and Greyhound Fund. And certainly between yesterday, Tuesday, and next Tuesday, I will have appeared on 4 occasions in 1 week between the Houses of Oireachtas to discuss the issue of the Horse and Greyhound Fund. I know Senator Ruane earlier mentioned that it wasn't going to be discussed at all. It will be next Tuesday. It was discussed in the Agriculture Committee at length yesterday. It was discussed in the Dáil this morning as part of a private member's motion, here in the Seanad today, and in the Dáil next Tuesday. So I certainly think it couldn't be accused of not being properly teased out. Of course, technically, it is a requirement every year that we come to actually seek the approval of both houses in relation to the increase in additional allocations under this fund. And I think I outlined in my opening statement, as many members did here in the chamber today as well, the value of both the horse racing industry and the greyhound industry to the country, to those who participate in it, and to the economies and to employment, and that it's important that we as a government do support those economic activities, and also recognise their important part in terms of rural traditions and their importance to rural heritage, as well as indeed to urban heritage. And there's a strong, particularly in the greyhound sector, a strong urban heritage and participation in that industry and sport as well. I know from many of the contributions made the importance that's being attached to welfare, and I absolutely concur with that. It is crucial. I know both HRA and Rasia Con Éireann also are very clear in terms of ensuring that the highest of welfare measures are implemented, and that continues to improve. There's been particular comment in relation to the greyhound sector in recent years, and Rasia Con Éireann, it's something that they have taken very seriously, and that they are committing a minimum of 10% of the funding they receive towards continuing to increase the animal welfare measures and supports that are in place. I know it's being referred to by many of the contributions in relation to the traceability system that's currently being put in place. That's really important, and some of the funding is going towards that, and also the rehoming support and the care homes, and that the funding will continue that in the year ahead. And funding is dependent state funding is dependent on those high standards being followed and being implemented. So I do ask for the support of the House for this funding. Obviously, the increase is particularly related to COVID, the fact that in both industries they haven't been able to for much of the year, be able to race, or indeed have had to do racing behind closed doors, losing lots of revenue as a result of that. So I know there's not unanimous support for that. Some are clearly not in favour of spending public funds in this regard. Many, I think a majority would be and do recognise the value of it and the importance of it. Some, I think, also are very much in the middle, and they want to do both sides of the road. And I suppose the benefit of having to appear in the Oireachtas on 4 occasions over the course of a week is that you get to see, even within the same parties, and I note Sinn Fein in particular here, the various different approaches depending on which member you're talking to. And obviously, I think we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years that their view on this issue very much depends on who they are talking to as well. But I do know in 2016, 17 and 18 the party did oppose the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund. I noted from last year, Deputy Stanley at that stage said, shame, after the debate, he said, shame on Fianna Fail, Fine Gael and Labour for passing the motion and the obscene levels of funding last year. And I know when so I know I see in your motion in front of the Dáil today from your spokesperson this year, Deputy Carrigy, 1 year on, he's very much in favour of the level of funding that was passed last year, but he just doesn't want the increases there this year. But so we're seeing that you're very much in favour of the industry, but you're just 1 year behind the curve on that regard. So clearly today in your motion you're supporting what you said was obscene last year and what you called shameful to other parties last year. So that's now your position this year. So we look forward to seeing what your position is next year, or maybe even next week. So I do commend the motion to the House.
Thank you, Minister, and no interruptions. Now, the question is that the motion be agreed to. Is the motion agreed? Agreed. Those in favour say tá. Those against, Niall. The motion is carried. We're going to move to this. Vote. Okay.
Motion regarding the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Regulations 2020. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and on that question a division has been challenged. Tellers Taw, Senator Sean Coyne and Senator Robbie Gallagher, Niall, Senator Alice Mary Higgins and Senator Lynn Boylan. This is a roll call vote. I'd ask the clerk to proceed with the vote.
Senator Ahearn. Senator Catanarda. Senator Ivana Bacik. Niall. Senator Francis Black. Niall. Senator Niall Blaney. Senator Victor Boyhan. Senator Lynn Boylan. Niall. Senator Paddy Burke. Senator Jerry Buttimer. Senator Malcolm Byrne. Senator Micheál Carrigy. Senator Pat Casey. Senator Shane Cassells. Senator Lisa Chambers. Senator Lorraine Clifford-Lee. Senator Martin Conway. Senator Gerard Crockwell. Senator Ollie Crowe. Senator John Cummins. Senator Emer Currie. Senator Paul Daly. Senator Aidan Davitt. Senator Regina Doherty. Senator Aisling Dolan. Senator Timmy Dooley. Senator Mary Fitzpatrick. Senator Eileen Flynn. Senator Robbie Gallagher. Senator Roisin Garvey. Senator Paul Gavin. Minister Pippa Hackett. Senator Alice Mary Higgins. Senator Annie Hoey. Senator Sharon Keoghan. Senator Sean Kine. Senator Tim Lombard. Senator Vincent P. Martin. Senator Michael McDougall. Senator John McGahan. Senator Erin McGreehan. Senator Rebecca Moynihan. Senator Ronan Mullen.
Senator Eugene Murphy, Senator David Norris, Senator Niall O'Donnell, Senator Dennis O'Donovan, Senator Fiona O'Loughlin, Senator Joe O'Reilly, Senator Pauline O'Reilly, Senator Ned O'Sullivan, Senator Lynn Rowan, Senator Mary Seary Carney, Senator Marie Sherlock, Senator Mark Wall, Senator Barry Ward, Senator Fintan Warfield, Senator Dermot Wilson.
Neil, 10. The question is carried. Could I ask the Deputy Leader to propose the suspension of the House for 15 minutes? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
House stands suspended for 15 minutes.